I'm Joshua. I'm an indie game developer from the Philippines, a country where a mayor once dumped trash in Manila Bay and pretended to clean it up for a photo op. And I'm working on a realism-focused space RPG called Spacefleet Heat Death, which you can now wishlist on Steam. Link in the description. Also, we just passed 2,500 subscribers. I really didn't expect to see this much support for the game, especially this early. I was so hesitant to tell people about it, and now I just wish my past self could see this and know there's nothing to worry about. So thank you so much for all of your support. Now, on with the devlog. Since I'm basically begging you to consider playing, and maybe even buying, my game, I think it's only fair that you know who I am, what I've worked on before, and why I'm making this game in the first place. This section is gonna be about me, my games, and how Heat Death became what it is now. If you don't want to hear about these and just prefer to skip to the next part, that's totally fine. Just skip to this timestamp. It was actually a show called Mr. Robot that inspired me to learn how to code. My first programming language was Python, which I learned while working in a call center, like a true patriotic Filipino. They didn't teach it to us, hell, they didn't even teach us anything, and that was where I made my first ever project. It was a program that made me a script based on data I'd input, like the client's name and what they needed help with. After that, I spent the school year making games on my phone during class, like the one you're seeing now. This is the best one I made at the time, and I'm still proud of it to this day. It's basically a game where you command airborne troops during World War II, and it is very reminiscent of Mud and Blood, a Flash game I grew up with. Learn Python the Hard Way by Z.A. Shaw was the book that taught me pretty much how to code. Anyway, college came by. I was enrolled in a computer science class, yet I didn't even have a PC. COVID also hit. Suffice to say, I dropped out, and spent the year lying to my parents while I rotted. Although I was productive in another way, now that I think about it, the right path that everyone's been on never worked for me, no matter how much I tried to follow it. I am very much an anomaly when it comes to my country's society and culture. Everyone knew it, including myself most of all, and no one told me it was okay. Anyway, I spent that time listening to podcasts about writing, reading The Expanse, and learning Unity. I found myself driven by this deep desire I had to turn The Expanse into something I could experience for myself, not just read about. And I am happy to say that that desire burns bright to this day. Which brings me to this space game, the very first prototype. I made circles around circles. This was meant to be the Earth and Moon in realistic scale. At the time, I called this the most depressing thing I've ever made, and I'm not sure why. Anyway, that eventually became this Space Game 2, a 2D pixel art game with multiple screens and characters moving around. This was closer to an RPG than Heat Death, but I also had no idea what I was doing. Restaurant started as something I wanted to make just for me and my friends to play, and it eventually grew into something I took more seriously. The game was inspired by Inglourious Basterds. In it, you and your friends manage a restaurant in Berlin during World War II. You can imagine how that goes. You're then tasked by Schindler to hide Jewish people from the Germans. I put a ton of effort into this thing, and this trailer's just been sitting in my PC for years. I've never actually shown this to anyone before. Fun fact, this is actually where Space Zero came from. It was a bug in the game where it showed a font had Space Zero, despite having nothing inside it. I was looking for cool brand names at the time and it just stuck. The idea for this game, Jeepney Simulator 1, actually started out as a joke between me and my friend. What if we made a game where you play as a jeepney driver? Well, Jeepney Simulator 1 was my first foray into 3D game development. It was scary and new and wacky, and I still have fond memories working on it. The game is about living life as a jeepney driver in the Philippines. Your job is to take your passengers to their destination, while calculating their change, swerving through traffic, and navigating the map along the way. I learned a lot from this game, and we took it seriously enough to actually post it on Steam and market it. I was actually able to earn money from this and managed to move out and support myself. Now, Space Game 3 was called Hyperspace Survivors. This was more of a story-driven RTS where you gather resources from debris to make more ships. And when those ships are destroyed, they leave more debris. This was also where I figured out how to hit something while it's moving or accelerating. You can see I was trying to go for the old vector graphics style, which is certainly interesting. Glad to see my UI design has improved a lot since then. For my next release, I wanted something more interesting. The movie The Thing remains as one of my favorite horror movies, and it inspired me to make a multiplayer game where you try to survive and escape, while one of your friends isn't who he says he is. Anyway, long story short, too weird for Filipino audience, also too dark to market effectively, servers are dead, 0 out of 10 wouldn't multiplayer again. The next iteration of Space Game was a very personal and lonely, story-driven horror strategy game. You wake up in a ship, there seems to be no humans left, and you have to fight AI drones and sneak into eerie space stations, all with the feature of 0G movement. 0 out of 10 would vomit again. Anyway, this was the sequel to Jeepney Simulator 1. It actually looks better and plays like a real game. I learned a lot with this one, such as inverse kinematics, police chases, trunk management, vehicle customization. I actually recommend this game. Try it if you want to have some nice cheap fun driving around while listening to music. It may actually still be on sale right now for 50% off if the Steam summer sale hasn't ended yet. Space Game 5. This was the VTOL VR inspired one, with strong emphasis on piloting a single ship and managing its vectors and weapons. For this prototype, I used a placeholder design inspired by the beautiful Alan Shepard class from the Lunar War. Credits to them for this awesome design. And finally, we have the current and final iteration of Space Game, Heat Death. Okay, this is the strategic map where we have Earth here and Luna. I was seeing them like that. And of course the Lagrange points as well. And if you look here, you can see the moon behind Earth. I love seeing that every single time. It's always awesome to see that. Okay, so we do have the L1 through 5 Lagrange points for Earth and Luna. Here, that one's covered there, L5 and L3. So here we have Dauntless, orbiting right above geostationary orbit. This is Hexy Station. Oh look, that's Shang-Chin over there. So basically the whole game will take place here, and the plan is for Spacefleet Seoul to have not just the Earth system, but all the other planetary systems as well, and of course a larger solar system map. Here we have an example of the movement system. I set Hexy Station as the target, and here we can see the acceleration line and deceleration line. We can change the rate of acceleration and the deceleration as well, and of course the G's will adjust to match that. The calculation isn't perfect. There are some things that I had to do differently to make it more optimized, but it works for now. You can also change the acceleration you have, which means of course you'll get there faster, but you are going to need more delta V, as you can see here. And of course the deceleration rate is also going to adjust in relation to that. You can also orbit another body. Here we basically have the same thing. We have the acceleration and deceleration ratios, and you can change the rate of acceleration. But the main difference is you can also change your orbit distance. This will determine how far along in Luna's orbit you will stop and start orbiting at. It's automatically set between the Roche limit of the moon and its heliosphere or sphere of influence. Same thing applies for the Earth here. And here we are. You'll notice that the game runs pretty quick, but you can adjust it to different degrees. And you can also pause the game. And finally, you can also do intercepts. Let's target Shangjin in this case. So the intercept point is set as here. You're going to be accelerating all the way through towards that point, and afterwards you're going to be decelerating, and once you hit this point, you're going to be orbiting whatever sphere of influence you're currently at. As you can see, you can't adjust the acceleration and deceleration sliders, but you can adjust both the acceleration and the deceleration. So this, for example, we can accelerate at 2 Gs and decelerate at 5 Gs. And you can see how that adjusts the trajectory. You can also see that this is way too expensive and you don't have enough delta V for this. So we can drag it back to 3 Gs here. Okay. Alright, that's the strategic scene for now. I hope you really like it. I'm very proud of this. This took a lot of work, and I can't wait to add more stuff to it. Here are the things I plan to add to this scene. We have factions, of course, trading convoys, space stations, logistics management. Then there's going to be patrol fleets as well. Then investments as belt miners, and you can gamble as well, which is, some might say, the best investment. Then there will be dynamic missions, where you go from place to place and doing odd jobs for certain factions. For Heat Death Soul, I plan to have the bigger solar system map, as I said earlier, and that's going to take place in a much bigger scale. Spacefleet Soul will also have hacking, research, customizable solar systems, and customizable factions. I also plan to add mod support if I can, along with a bunch of other features as well. Okay, and this is the tactical scene. Here we have Dauntless and a bunch of the other Shin Republic ships. Here we have their light corvette and the Copperhead class. This is their heavy corvette. This is their attack frigate, which comes with 8 of these turrets. They love their nose-mounted lasers and these ring launch systems, or RLS. Here we have a little tanker and a hauler. That's basically just a reskinned Changjin. I really wanted to have white, red, and black for the Shin Republic's color scheme. Here you can see that the ships in the game are really just a bunch of cylinders I strapped together. Even the missiles are just a bunch of cylinders and spheres that I scaled up. So yeah, I'm definitely planning to upgrade the graphics in the future. I would like to have a game that's not just a bunch of squares and cylinders stuck together. Here we'll have an example of the docking system. This is basically how you're going to interact with space stations in the game. You're going to stop at one of these holding points and wait till a shuttle like this one docks to your ship. I also worked a lot on the camera for the game. Here there's a mode where it's constantly rotating to face whatever it's looking at. I also created a missile spawner script, which would spawn a bunch of missiles towards a target, and I do it for testing purposes, but it's also been useful for creating B-roll, which you've probably seen a lot of by now. There is 3D movement in this game. Currently, as you can see, Dauntless is using its RCS thrusters. You can, of course, also go up or down in the Y direction. And of course, the fabled flip and burn. Hell yeah. Tracking also works when your target is accelerating or if it's drifting. They're going to predict where your ship is going to be, and they will adjust accordingly. Though, of course, they cannot predict when you're going to start decelerating. Ooh, good hit there. Okay, so here we have a little missile as our target. I removed the PTCs for this test. We have our laser here at the front. I'm going to turn off the ceasefire for the PTC system. And you can see the lasers are pretty much invisible with some basic effects. You can also set it to offense, which will target other ships. Okay, and here we have the Shenzhen side. You'll notice that this station here, Longshu, looks very similar to Chang'an. That's because Chang'an was one of the stations that the Shin Republic captured during their rebellion. Here we have Baisha, or White Snake. This is the O'Neill cylinder of the Shenzhen Interplanetary Corporation. As you can see, it is pretty big. Also, don't mind that all these ships are named Dauntless. Here you'll see Shenzhen's color scheme of black, gray, and gold. And they also have different designs for their radiators. You'll notice that instead of nose-mounted lasers, Shenzhen uses a lot of nose-mounted missile launchers. And here is an example of a Shenzhen capital ship. This is the Hebei class battleship. It has a lot of radars, a lot of lasers, guns, more guns, and PDCs. Of course, this is just something I was screwing around with. The design, once again, is definitely subject to change in the future. Going forward, I plan to add AI combat, railguns, anti-ship lasers, more ships from different factions, drones and drone warfare, heat and power management, radal and thermal signatures, E-war, and more. Heat death takes place around the 23rd century, where unlike many sci-fi stories, there was no inciting incident that forced humans to colonize space. Earth and its humans still exist, albeit in rough shape. Most major bodies in the solar system have permanent habitation, and space travel revolves around fusion and a race to obtain antimatter. The following are the major factions you'll find in the game. Note that the flags are subject to improvement and that Spacefleet Seoul will have way more major factions. Once a technological powerhouse, Cascadia recently transformed into a military-industrial giant after a coup. They specialize in research and technologically advanced ships. Their doctrine emphasizes the importance of drone carriers and hitting the enemy from afar. Blue Dragon Orbital was a cartel-controlled syndicate that reinvented itself as the dominant South American space corporation. They specialize in agriculture and off-Earth transport with their mass drivers. Hermes led the rebuilding efforts after the European War and eventually expanded into a vast trading network across the solar system. They specialize in asteroid mining, trade, and shipbuilding. Their ships are designed for long hauls across the solar system. The East African states began as a coalition of 5 African nations working together, which ultimately unified into one. Their efforts in fusion technology and space-based industry gave them vast amounts of wealth, which they used to create and maintain their heavily fortified space stations, and of course, their massive space elevator. Following a century of resource conflicts, West India and Persia merged into a technocratic state focused on scientific progress called the Persian Federation. They achieved major breakthroughs in fusion engines and reactors. They are currently leading the efforts in antimatter development. The Shin Republic was born in the ashes of blood and war. An alliance of worker uprisings against the Shenzhen Interplanetary Corporation, this faction boasts wide diversity, repurposed fleets, and even a captured Shenzhen capital ship. Yet beneath its proud banner, old rivalries and hidden agendas threaten to break the alliance, leaving it exposed to enemies without. Laser weapons showed great results in the rebellion, so now almost every ship in Shin's warfleets boasts a nose-mounted laser. The Shenzhen Interplanetary Corporation started life as a shipping conglomerate that evolved into one of the largest space-based manufacturing powers in the solar system after its monopoly on the archaic tritium plants. Its lack of military might led to vast destruction and the formation of the Shin Republic. They spent the past decade making sure that that mistake won't happen again. Shenzhen now has the largest space force in Earth orbit and still focuses on its industry and maintaining its O'Neill cylinder. Their lighter warships are cheap and numerous, while their heavier capital ships are as big as they are expensive. They love their missile swarms. When rising sea levels consumed Alaska's coastal cities, survivors took to the seas and eventually to space. The Alaskan exodus led to the creation of hundreds of habitats and colonies on and around planets, moons, and asteroids. They specialized in asteroid mining, ice mining, and mobile space stations. Here we have the roadmap for Heat Death's development. As you can see, June was for basic combat, and that's pretty much done. July is going to be for the strategic map. August will have power and heat management. September will have stations and trade. October will have extra damage. This will include new weaponry such as railguns, things like that. And on the 13th, I plan to have a Steam Next Fest demo as well. For November, it will be Death and Taxes. December will have further developments on factions and AI. I plan to make the 19th the early access release. Do keep in mind that this is subject to change. Unexpected things can happen during development, and the release may be delayed. Afterwards, I'm going to be updating the roadmap and adding new phases and content based on community feedback. Do you know there's two other games called Heat Death? Yes, I have reached out to both of them, but I found out just a couple hours ago that there is potential for a trademark dispute in the future. So I decided to be safe and changed the game's name, again, to Spacefleet Heat Death. I've ensured that there won't be any problems in the future regarding the name. Is there FTL travel? How long will it take to go from planet to planet? And what kind of drives do you use? We do have torch drives in the game, using direct fusion, but that may change to something with antimatter. Currently, there's no FTL, and the game is confined to Earth Luna anyway. I am thinking about fusion ships being common, whereas antimatter capable ships being expensive and rare. How did I solve the origin point problem? It's basically just abstraction. I scaled down the game a lot. The tactical scene is around 100 kilometers in diameter, which does pose some limitations, but from what I've seen so far, it should be fine. Are orbits linear or Keplerian? Do you have Lagrange points? Do bodies have spheres of influence? In heat death, you can't do Hohmann transfers with the way it works, but I'll try to add more advanced physics in Spacefleet Soul. Since you have torch ships, you basically just point somewhere and flip and burn. There are going to be Lagrange points in the game, but they're just set points in the map. They're not actually affected by physics or anything like that. And yes, bodies do have spheres of influence. Once you enter the moon's sphere of influence, for example, then you can start orbiting it. Are there O'Neill cylinders? Yes, Shenzhen has a gigantic O'Neill cylinder. It was actually in the teaser video near the end, but you could barely see it. Will there be customization? This is by far the most asked question, and for good reason. I've replied to a few people asking about customization and realized it only helps them and whoever reads my reply, as people still ask about it. I realized it would be better if I answered questions in a video to reach a wider segment of my audience. But yeah, I can't promise ship and station customization in Heat Death, and it is not in the plans for now since I have to focus on the core features first. For now, customization will be in Spacefleet Soul only. Will there be logistics? Yes, there will be haulers hauling supplies, resources, and more, tankers carrying fuel and propellant for your ships, and stations taking in resources and outputting products. These will be vital for your peacetime and wartime economies. Will there be multiplayer? No, and it's not in the plans for Soul either. My experience with multiplayer showed me it greatly increases development time. It can double or even triple, depending on complexity. And Heat Death is going to be a very complex game. Maybe for the third title, though, if the series is successful enough. Something like Spacefleet Interstellar sounds nice. Will there be colonies? Yes, I plan to have colonies on the moon, but there will be better colony and station management in Spacefleet Sol as well. Will there be deep crew management and crew roles? Yes, I am aiming to have three crew roles. Specialists who control all the panels and manage the ship, engineers who do the actual fixing inside and out, and marines who protect the ship from boarders and actually do some boarding themselves. What is a typical ISP for your ships? Currently, the only ship in the strategic map has a specific impulse of 30,000. It uses a direct fusion drive. Will there be stealth? In the lore, there are networks of spy satellites tracking everything in the solar system, so there's little chance you can sneak up on someone. But there is potential for mines and objects hidden in debris or asteroids. We'll see. Will pricing be different? Will Space Suite Soul be a separate purchase? Yes, I plan to price Space Suite Heat Death low upon early access release and increase it once it leaves early access into a full release. Space Fleet Soul will be a separate purchase and will pretty much be an entirely different game. Once released, I'll make Heat Death free to play. Will there be loot boxes, pay to win, microtransactions, day one DLCs, always online DRM, and NFTs? Okay, nobody actually asked me this, hopefully because it's obvious, but I will never sell crap in any of my games. Do you use AI in your game? I'm lucky enough to have learned how to code before AI took over the world, so I do pretty much everything from the programming to asset creation. I just use ChatGPT in regards to the formulas and deeper mathematics for the game, as I would not call myself an expert in literal rocket science. I also get a lot of ideas from the Project Row and Children of a Dead Earth websites. Can you see your puppy now? Yes, here she is, the secret prize for those who are still around. Say hi to all your hundreds of thousands of adoring fans. Hello. Her name is Java, and she would love it if you wishlisted Heat Death. Shake. One wishlist means one more treat for her. Shake. Shake. You're not shaking. High five. Oh. You're such a cutie. You know that? You're such a cutie. My little daughter. Okay. Say goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen. Alrighty, I hope you guys enjoyed that devlog. I plan to do one per month to talk about the monthly phase and how it's going. If you haven't already, now's the time to wishlist Heat Death on Steam. Subscribe as well and make sure to click the bell icon because I'm going to be making a lot of posts to update you guys. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world to me. I'll see you soon. You'll notice that Longshe, Longshe, you'll notice that this station here